fans, welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined as always by my co-host and whitest man in New Orleans,
Alex Dandino.
That'll make sense in a moment. Before that, some business.
Oh, God.
Please take a second and leave the show a rating and review wherever you find us, especially if that happens to be Apple Podcast app. That helps us out enormously. Make some charts, get some new Alchemists. We've seen this happen recently, and thank you guys for the help. Thank you guys for the ratings and reviews. It means the world to us. Just a quick 5-star sentence or two about why you like us. You don't even have to be telling the truth. Just make it up. We appreciate it either way.
It's fine.
You can see our faces and hear our voices on our YouTube channel, Nerd Alchemist. Working on some new content for that, so hopefully by next year we'll have a kick-ass YouTube page. So go ahead and get in early. Press subscribe over there. You can email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com, or reach us on any social media account you have. We're there too, at filmalchemistpod on Instagram, at film_alchemist on Twitter. It's a great way to reach out to us. Let us know movies you'd like to hear us cover, new, old themes, double feature, guest hosts, anything like that. We would love to hear from you. Every December, we stuff your stocking. That is a listener selection month. We've never been able to get to them all, so best to get them in early and make them as awesome as possible. We'll pick our favorite, and then we'll get through as many as we can, our favorites, and get through as many as we can. Every December, you guys pick our movies. So that's a great reason to get a hold of us on socials or filmalchemistpod@gmail.com one more time. All right, Alex. Candyman 2, Farewell to the Flesh. Now we are traveling with Daniel Robitaille to Nolans, a place that seemed tailor-made to make a great backdrop for Candyman. A little hamstrung by following the widest cast of characters in recent memory. But I would argue that I think Candyman unfairly gets dragged down by its sequels. I think the sequels are not streamlined nor really capture that great effect that the first one does. And I think Candyman proper has suffered because of that, and that might be a little bit why it's faded. As time has gone on, right? Very much like The Matrix, right? When you see the first one, you're like, yay. You see the next one, why are all these white people doing all these things, right? That's kind of what happened to Candyman 2 and 3. But I would argue Candyman 2 has some really cool ideas that it adds to the mythology of the Candyman. It has some really good moments lost in some kind of weird moments. What were your initial thoughts on Candyman 2? Farewell to the Flesh.
Great title. Just starting that off.
I like this movie for its words.
The title is very grabbing. Like I was telling you before the pod, the first time I remember, I didn't even know there was a sequel to Candyman until when I was a kid. I actually bought a comic book with the poster. It's on the Wikipedia or the IMDb page. I'm not really sure which.
It's like a honeycomb with an eye poking through. It's really cool.
Yeah, and Kelly Rowan is on there, and she's like longingly looking off to the side with like a bee in the corner of her mouth. But I remember it from the back of a comic book I bought, and that was like my only. I thought it was just like another thing. I had forgotten about it until much later on in life. I'm like, oh shit, that's an actual sequel to Candyman. With Tony Todd intact. So, yeah, look, this is not my favorite sequel we watched for this month. But it does have some good stuff. Like, I mean, there's some amazing moments in this movie that make it worth watching. And it is weird. Like, so we go from Chicago to New Orleans, and again, like we're just focusing on white people in New Orleans, which seems really weird for a movie about a murdered black man. But you know,
there is a
whatever.
There is a cultural vibe that I felt like
1995 of it all.
Right, but I mean, I feel like there was a cultural vibe they could have really tapped into. I felt like the first movie did a pretty good job of walking the worlds. And the rich whiteness of the cast and characters was for a reason. This time,
Sure. I mean,
I guess the rich white people are a more targeted group of victims, so that's a nice
Right.
change of pace. But it felt like
definitely.
this movie said, we liked Candyman, but we need a lot more mirrors and Jesus symbolism. And that's kind of the way they went. And let nothing else get in the way of that. We learned that the family in the movie are Candyman's descendants, which leads you just asking, like, what kind of absolute albino devils were they trying to marry to try to get the Candyman's descendants to be so white?
So white in
the
this.
murder
So white.
suspect guy at the start is just straight up Ginge. She is just the whitest, blondest. I was like, how? So it leads you to all these really weird, like, breeding scenarios. Like, this movie's really strange.
You really got to think your way through this one to get there.
What I focus on in this movie, though, is I do like the mirror and the Jesus stuff, but I think it's weird because the Farewell to the Flesh is also the sequel where it feels like we dig a lot more into this human side of the Candyman himself, Daniel Robitaille, right? We name him this movie. We actually witness in a series of very horrific scenes what actually happened to him.
Oh yeah, it's brutal. Like, that might be my favorite part of the movie simply because, like, it's horrifyingly shot. Like, and again, I like that part of the movie probably the most. I want to go back to New Orleans is such a unique choice for this, and especially because, like, the history and the celebration of the dead. Like, I've worked in New Orleans. I spent enough time in New Orleans actually focusing on a lot of the local folklore and a lot of the, like, celebration of dead itself. Not just, not just like a band going into the graveyard or anything like that, but much more like the ritual. Like, I worked on a show where they did an exorcism, which was really strange to watch. It was not right. But again, it was one of those things. So New Orleans is a perfect location for, I think, the continuation of a Candyman legend, because it's a great, not only because of how awful the history of New Orleans is, but also because it is so filled with folklore and so filled with legends itself. It's a really fascinating setting. And I think that's the thing that I like the most about this, besides, like, the flashback stuff. That's probably the thing I like the most, is they do an okay job of taking advantage. But again, we get back to, like, just so white. Like, I can't explain it. It's fascinating to me.
Well, we start off with
how we went from Daniel Robitaille to Ginge. Like,
right. Well, we start off with the smarmy dickhead professor's back. So again,
oh yeah. By the way, this is a great opening.
Another person that you want to see who wiggled off the hook.
Stop. You did this last episode. I'm going to tell you to stop right now.
I mean, as far as hook-based puns, I think the audience really bits on that one. No, okay, that's the last one.
This is very Philip Purcell of you.
I'm really angling for that NPR money. See, I can talk real quiet and laugh at myself, you bitch. Sorry, now NPR kicked me off the list again. I'm back on the do not return call list. No, but there is so we start off with Smarmy Dick Professor, and again, this is kind of the microcosm of the whole movie, is New Orleans. Man, I want to do New Orleans and be set in New Orleans. But it's just him in a book reading with just all white people with, like, elbow pads.
It's
just
so
like,
weird.
Good Lord.
Yeah, everyone's in the crowd just wearing tweed. Like, it's like, and again, it's New Orleans. Cannot imagine wearing tweed in New Orleans.
That's right. But see, this is the thing. Now, because of what he experienced and Helen trying to bury him, and the fact that he won the Candy Wars, I guess as it were, right? He now does not have respect. He made a book whose cover is a mirror. And in front of all these other white people, with maybe a bit of hesitation, a small amount, he says Candyman's name and even pays an assistant to pretend to attack him, Candyman style. It's a fascinating place to start because it tells us again, he who was Helen's colleague, but even more like ranked above her, right? Yeah. Still didn't get the fucking message. He lost 2 of his colleagues, 3 if you, Bernadette too was a grad student. 3 of them went down to this thing. He still has no respect for the power of Candyman and has used him now for a book, right? So it just sets you like, well, no wonder Candyman enjoys being the rumor that gets to keep killing. They will not learn the fucking lesson. And then he gets jumped by Ginger Guy. He's in a bathroom. He gets got, right? What do you make of... I think this one starts to play a little bit with why and when Candyman appears. Why does Candyman give him the rope? And let's take out the caveat of bad and convenient screenwriting. Let's try to really think about what this movie shows us and how that can be applied to how Candyman operates.
Right. So you're asking me why does he give Purcell the option, or
why does he give Purcell like another hour to live?
I mean, I don't know. I didn't really think about it other than it being bad screenwriting faux pas.
You know the rules. We try to pretend that all of this is expertly crafted. Is it? Because this is the thing. Let me mash this up with one other scene, right? Let me mash this up with one other scene and get your take. So, Candyman could have killed him right there in front of the elbow crowd, right? They all go home and they're like, oh God, I got to write this up for the Atlantic and the New Yorker or whatever the fuck they work. That is a lot of press. That's a lot of press for the old Candyman, right? Later in the movie, when he murders just the Cobra Kai of police detectives. Well, you think better than me? Think better than me, guy? Right? They kill that detective. Candyman has to know that there's a security camera in there and allows himself to be recorded, ghost hunter style, lifting and eviscerating this guy while the ginger sits in the corner. Ah! So in one scene, he's fine with his image getting out there because it helps somehow spread this rumor. Self-destruction? Who knows why? But he's fine with himself being seen. Why wait for Purcell? Why not kill him in front of the guy in the bathroom? Why does Candyman kill in private in this movie so often?
I mean, to me, that is like the... Okay, go with me on this. Looking in a mirror, okay?
Yeah.
In a mirror, when you are finding yourself looking in a mirror, like gazing at yourself, you are not in a public place. It is a very private, solitary act of examining yourself in a mirror. So to me, and this is strange, but to me, like the concept of the Candyman coming to people in private, but like it goes along with what the ritual of looking in a mirror is anyways. So of course you're not again, I didn't understand why getting caught like ghost hunter style on a video feed seemed very weird to me in this movie. This is one of those moments in the movie I'm like, that's not going to work for me right now. Like that was a bit that I was like, nope, not for me. But I do think that there is an intimacy to the mirror gazing, and there's an intimacy, and they bring it up the movie explains it too. Like, this is a really common thing in a lot of cultures, which is like the mirror captures your soul. So to me, that is probably the thing that is most interesting to me. Is it's almost like it's the portal to someone else's. It's the portal to not just existence, but to someone else's being itself. So for me, like to kill someone, like with Candyman to appear in a mirror, like you have to look in the mirror to say the Candyman's name. For him to appear after that is him to snatch your soul and take it back to his plane. It's not just the ritual of killing. It's literally the ritual of departing your soul from your body, so to speak. And the only way to get that back to where it needs to be is to come with him through the mirror. I don't know. the solitariness of murder is very different.
Yeah, because in the first one, you could say he kills in private often, but usually in the first one, it's a little more theatric, right? It's setting Helen up. It's making sure that other people know Candyman exists. In this movie, the kills are getting attributed to Candyman, but by this radio host and detectives who are just making wild investigatory leaps. It doesn't feel like the Candyman is writing his own story anymore, right? There is a part of, he says at one point, they really have this cool thing in this one I like, which is, he says, I am their hatred and dark selves reflected back to them. Mm-hmm. And there is something, I like that the mirror's usage in this movie, because when we're staring at ourselves in the mirror is the only time, like I have that a couple times a week where like I see myself in the mirror and I'm just like, who the fuck are you kidding? Who the fuck do you think you are? You know what I mean? You look at yourself in the eyes and you lean in and you stare right into your own eyes. And it feels like this infinite thing. And you're just like, I see all your bullshit laid bare. Like, what? All these things we get caught up in that one moment out of the shower, you're just like, oh, fuck. And like all of it falls away. All these lies you told yourself. All these, I'm gonna do better tomorrow. No, you're not, you fuck. Right? You start like going in on yourself. And you're like, Jesus Christ. And in that moment, I like that for Purcell and the cop, because they both are like, Purcell's looking in the mirror and he's like, oh my God, I do fear Candyman, but I played brave for them. I know I'm full of shit. Gets got. The cop over there is like, he's standing over the ginger and he's like, whoa, yeah. Oh, you think you're better than me? Think you're better than me because you big head. I don't know why he's Australian now instead of Italian. But he starts doing that and he knows that he feels inferior, right? He does not feel superior to this guy as he's trying to tough talk him. And that's when Candyman gets him, right?
Right.
The interesting one to this point, right, is when her mom gets it. Because her mom was lying about the Candyman genetics, right? Her mom never called the Candyman, but still gets caught by him. You could argue almost that her daughter, hatred for her in that moment, when she's exposed, that her daughter becomes her mirror. And she knows that she did wrong. I like that. I think that's a good beat.
Yeah, I mean, I think that works for me. I mean, I don't know. It's just such a strange, like...
Should this have won Best Screenplay? Is that what we're...
No. But that's the thing, is like, this...
Was there another Mirror movie that came out that year? I don't know.
But I think this is the thing that makes this movie stronger than perhaps it should be. Because, like, this is not my... Again, there's a lot of parts about this that don't make sense to me, that are just sort of like kill for
it has a
sake.
Snowball occultist. What do you want?
But okay, I'm not getting into that. But like, what I'm saying is like, there's a lot of elements of this movie that I think are attempting to capitalize on what made the first one so great. And there are bits in this that are wonderful because they do such a good job of honoring the first one and bringing this sense of, I think the sense of history that has to come through, and especially everything that, like, I don't know, it's a fascinating kind of movie because it shouldn't work on a lot of levels, but as soon as you get deeper into the mythology and the history itself, I still can't believe I'm engaged, because like we said, how are these people so white? And yet I'm still engaged in this sort of like weird mythology of like it working. It's bizarre to me. It doesn't make any sense.
There's a lot of, like, let me just rattle off like 4 or 5 bizarre things, right? One, why is Matthew seeing Candyman and drawing him in art class?
No idea.
When he, by the end of the movie, is involved 0% in the narrative of this film, how it happens?
0%.
Like, literally has no effect. The Snowball occultist. That was kind of cool, but like, all right, that's very New Orleans, maybe. Why does the mom want to fuck her husband so bad? The mom seems to hint that perhaps the Candyman gave her cancer the day it killed his father. Like, there are some moments in this song I was like, huh? Like I was a bit baffled. The detective work's not good. She just pops up in a murder, and they don't accuse her the way that they accuse her brother. When her stud muffin husband's body's ripped apart. That weird cutaway to people just fucking on the balcony during neither here nor there. None of this matters, per se. There's weird things that happen in this movie. I'll tell you the moment in this film where I was like, oh, fuck yeah, I love this thing, right? I guess I love this scene, personally. I don't know that the whole movie works all the time, but this is a really cool riff that they came up with. When we finally see the painting that Candyman did of his love, his betrothed, I thought it was so fucking awesome that she was holding a mirror and he painted himself in that mirror. I thought it was a really cool painting. It tied together this idea that he thought he had overcome all these obstacles and barriers that would have been ahead of him, that through his merit and his skill, he had won this woman, had this job, had this wealth, had this talent. I thought it was a really cool concept that he was in the mirror in the painting, so we can kind of see where his head and ego were going. And then he realized he was not in a better world. So you mix that with, we get to see these scenes of what happened to him as he's showing her. So we have to assume that this is kind of an inverted mirror version, right? Even though we know what they did was bad, maybe they're a little more cartoonish now. Like, do we believe they really said sweet for the sweets and all these, like, branded things? Her running away with the mirror, forcing, or as in perhaps she's the one who kept him alive as this, like, plague of bees came? I thought that segment of the movie was a really cool addition to the mythology.
Yes, I agree. The thing I liked the most and the thing that I noted was the daughter, because Carol, is it Caroline? Caroline's the lover. The daughter, they raise her as white, which is really, again, like, goes to what we've been talking about this whole time, but it's really fascinating to me because, again, so much of this, such a fascinating, and again, to me, these movies, the Candyman movies have such a fascinating racial component that I think got glossed over when they came out. But now we go back and we watch these movies, and it's much more interesting and much more fascinating because, like, the idea is that the daughter of Daniel and Caroline's, like, she's raised as a white girl. So there's also this sort of, like, it also kind of starts to explain a little more. And then she meets Powder,
and they shift the balance back towards the lily white bastards they were in those flashbacks.
But I'd say even more interesting than that, though, is, like, it feeds even more into kind of like the Candyman, like we were talking about last episode, where, like, Candyman talks about shedding innocent blood. Like, it fuels to me a little bit more of this instance of, like, not only is Candyman wronged in so many ways by all these dickheads who chase him down, chop his hand off, feed him to the bees. Then on top of that, he loses this sense of self altogether because, I mean, obviously he's otherworldly at that point anyways, but now he's not even acknowledged as a member of his own family. It's a fascinating wrinkle to me, because then no one is innocent. Then everyone is part of the problem, and everybody becomes sort of up for grabs, in my opinion, because, you know, he's been forsaken on multiple levels. So why wouldn't he be angry at the world at large itself? It's pretty fascinating.
And then it becomes odd that the family somehow is cursed and that they have to try so hard to erase him. But because of what they did, he becomes this larger than life story.
Yeah.
It's a really, I think that's kind of the cool line in the movie is break the mirror, break the curse, right? Is that there is this kind of caught in self-image thing that Candyman plays with a lot that this movie does really well, right? We see that moment when those fucking pilgrims, right? They're like, sweets for the sweet, Candyman.
Yeah.
And as soon as they see a biblical fucking swarm of bees coming, which was literally their plan, was to smother this man, Winnie the fucking Pooh style, and have those bees go at him. But when they see it, it feels so unnatural and horrifying to them that you get these looks on their face of horror. Like, they actually look like for the first
Yeah.
time they are seeing what they've done to this man. Right? And in a way, some of them might get stung and have like a small, like, connective pain, like, oh God, this is what we've done to him. Granted, they just chopped his fucking arm off, and then horrible, horrible things they've done to him, right? But you see even a moment where they're like, oh fuck. Like, he is a reflective surface to them in that moment. When they see the daughter run out, right? And she's crying for her lover. And they're like, could she even look at you? And it's like, well, she's right here. She's doing that right this second. Right? And they hold the mirror up to him, and it's just this constant, they are trying everything to get out of what they've done. Right? I thought that was kind of cool. Oh, I will laugh at two other moments. I thought this movie has two of the greatest reaction shots in movie history. And I'll see if you remember them, right? So one of them is when the old lady's like, go away, you can't come to my apartment. She's sick. She needs rest. And the, lady saunters up, our blonde hair lead lady, she saunters up and she sees it's the two kids in her class, right? A girl and a young African-American boy. Right. And she just goes, let him up. And the mom goes, in here? Like with a question, and her face gets like she smelled a diaper. And I was like, man, like really giving away the twist that you were going to be a not cool racist at the end. She's like, in here? I was just like, well, you jumped your twist ending there. And the other one I love was when she runs up, right, to the priest, who just seems like a pretty good guy, pretty good dad, whatever. And she comes up, and he's like, his son's missing. That is traumatic. And she just goes, I summoned Candyman in front of Matthew. And he just does the, and you can just read that, this piece of shit. In that side, this bitch. Right? As he like turns his head in size. I was like, it's the fucking best acting in that whole movie. Because at that one, he's just like, Jesus, give me the strength to not strangle this piece of shit who literally summoned Candyman in front of my child to stop a fist fight between 12-year-olds. Probably the best acting in the whole movie. I loved it. Oh, Lord, give me strength. Give me the strength. And then the fact that the dad's like, oh, you're going after my son? Good luck. I'm going back to sit in the church.
Oh my God, that literally,
the movie is worth watching alone for those two reaction shots. They are beautiful.
True. Yeah. But, oh God, please don't let me have to deal with this. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the movie is, I don't know, like, it's such a fascinating thing. Like, and then you get into sort of I mean, I guess it's Catholic because it's Ash Wednesday, right? So that's Catholicism. I'm Catholic. I should know this. But you get sort of into that kind of stuff, and again, like none of the first movie covered anything religious, which I thought was, again, is a weirder thing to me about going to New Orleans. Is, to me, New Orleans is about the folklore and much more about, I wouldn't say voodoo, but at least more local religion than it is about like Christianity.
It's an odd mix though, because it is these like really weird superstitions and partying built on this pile of tragedy and like original sin, right? Like New Orleans is a weird mix. Because they get on this too, right? The Jesus thing becomes real. They hammer the Jesus imagery home. Hammer that home, right?
Yes.
Which I thought was a bit of an odd mix, right? Because it's, Jesus died for all of our sins, which is kind of a why? And then we still commit sins. So does Jesus have to come back and like, does he have like Blockbuster late fees for all the bad shit we've been doing? Like, all right, fine, whatever. And then Candyman just died because of our, it's almost the weird thing. The movie gets dangerously close to saying that Candyman brought it on himself, right? Like, was his sin of being vain and a mirror?
That's like
the movie kind of, I think it's because it's a little ambiguous at the end. And he's just like, we have a journey to take, me and your unborn baby. I don't know why he's Foghorn Leghorn now. I'm not doing good with my voices.
What the fuck is going on with the accents right now? Good Lord.
And Tony Todd has such a great voice, but I'm just not doing it justice right now. But it's, what was the journey? What was the fucking plan? Why? But then it's like, all right, I'm getting nitpicky here and there. Like, I don't understand anything that's happening or why. But I like the idea because when she snuck into the ghost house, I'm like, well, that's not a very well guarded mirror that anyone could have just accidentally broken with a beer bottle. But he just says, like, be my witness, right? That is an important connection to the Jesus symbolism again, too, right? Like, you have to witness this and know what had happened to make this movement great. I mean, I think the Jesus thing's a little tortured. It reminded me of, because Candyman kind of had that Passion of the Christ scenes where my mom and dad are like, let's just go watch Jesus get his fucking ass kicked for 2 hours. It'll make us better Christians. That way we can skip church. We'll hit the Wednesday night matinee and we'll just see Jesus get fucking beaten on like it's a UFC fight with no referees. And we love Jesus more. And that's kind of, I mean, you're like, oh, that's Candyman 2. That's what you want to watch, Mom, but just the less cool version of that.
I mean, it is interesting because it's like a convalescence of religious imagery where, like, they have him, like in the flashback, they have him pinned down and he's obviously, his arms are outstretched because they're about to chop one of them off. But, like, even more so, it's original sin, it's the sacrifice of Jesus. Like, it's all these kind of really specific, it's all this really specific imagery that's really easy. Like, I think that's the other thing, too, and the thing that I liked the most about Candyman the first time I saw it was I liked that I didn't know enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that most confuses me and disappoints me a little bit about the Jesus imagery is not just that it's like hammered over the head, but because I know it too well. Like, I like learning new things, particularly with Candyman. So I think we're in New Orleans, which is spooky and interesting enough. And there's a lot of history there that people don't know about regularly. So I thought that bringing that element in didn't really do much for me. And I think...
so does it work for you on the level of these people whose life was rooted in were good Christian people being the ones to then fucking pulverize this guy?
Well, I think that's what I'm getting at. Like, to me, it feels like a little bit of a hackneyed premise. Like, I personally, and again, this is like, there are elements of this movie that I like a lot. This is not one of them, and just doesn't work for me because, quite honestly, like, everybody in the history of movies we've watched like this all think they're good Christians. Like, literally anyone who does something absolutely diabolical in the name of Christianity thinks they're a good Christian.
Sure.
We're watching it happen right now in our world. But, like, that's, like, the thing that bothers me the most is that's not, to me, what Candyman was about. Candyman is about accepting the reality of the unknowable and accepting the reality of the supernatural itself. So to, like, trace it back to, like, oh, well, this is what happened to this man. He has suffered a great deal and, you know, he's coming for his revenge. Or is he? Like, that to me is what doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And that's why I think, like, people who think they're good Christians in this movie and doing that kind of thing doesn't really work. Like, people either in this movie, from a character standpoint, they either need to commit to being pieces of shit and doing it in the name of, like, the worst thing possible, which is, like, what? Probably eugenics in this case. Or they don't, or they are begrudgingly... Or they're looking for begrudging forgiveness.
I think a lot of the characters misrepresent themselves, and that's where you get your mirror thing. Again, the Jesus thing, I think, if they had only done it once or twice, right? But like every fucking scene, it feels like has a Jesus moment.
Right.
But I think the idea of Jesus being a reflection of his time on the people and like, look at this anger and hatred. I was here to help you. Levitate up, boom, you know, level up, boom, 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 you know, game over, we win. I think that's how the story went. I'm not sure. Well, and Candyman, it's like in that moment watching these people that think they're good Christians do something so vile, and then the plague of bees is like, oh, fuck, I think we messed up, but then still trying to lie, right? I have no idea why she and her baby need to go on the journey with him, like what that's going to be, but I love the idea of him, Candyman now, as a ghost in our modern times, right? This specter, this reaper, actually weeping, right? Like that's a really cool scene and one that we don't get from a lot of our horror movie big baddies. He's crying as she relives this pain with him, right?
Right. Well,
and to me, it was just, oh my God, he sees someone who she truly sees him now. She knows, right? She doesn't just know him as this guy who gutted everyone she loved, but like she sees the horror that was committed to him. The problem is then the movie's like, oh, but he became what they were, and you're like, I don't think I'm going there. Yeah, like I think he has a pretty good reason for why he started murdering, unlike the Pilgrims.
Right, exactly. I think that's the problem is the movie tries to kind of like movie has this weird tendency to try to like push you into like, hey, this movie's called Candyman because this is a bad guy. His name's Candyman. It's really bad. He's a bad guy. Just remember, he's a bad guy. He kills people.
Right.
And like pretty much in the middle of the movie, I never think this about the Candyman in general, but then in the middle of the movie, they try to like hammer it, or like towards the end of the movie, they try to hammer it home. Like, you're never going to get me to the point where I think the Candyman is the wrong guy. Like,
well,
nobody should.
This is the thing.
It's
he
weird.
is, but in this one, they try to personalize it so much. And I think they're almost too cute trying to make sure that there's this thing in movies where it's you read too many screenplay books and too many director tracks, and you're just like, everything has to be so perfectly interlocked. And every single bit of every frame has to be so filled with visual meaning that I think you can just get a little overcooked, right? So this movie, It's like you can do Jesus metaphors without having literal Jesus walk across the street and then have people holding cue cards. Like there are ways to get that's not so on the nose in trying to frame him as a Jesus, which he's not, right? You're trying to show him as this inversion. Fine. You can get to these other things without so overly quantifying every image. Because, again, the original Candyman is this omnipresent, like you said, those giant aerial vistas, right? He's always above us. And then maybe there's a part where she is just crazy as fuck. So it leaves you kind of to play with a lot of the, why is he doing what he's doing? What is this? What is this? This one, I feel like it's the classic Paranormal Activity problem, right? They made amazing movies on this one gag that anything, anywhere, any time of day, something horrible is in the same room as you in your house where you feel safe, and something crazy could happen. And then they got to the fifth or sixth one, and they said, what if the demon was like a fart cloud, and we could see it in every frame? And you immediately watch it, and within 5 minutes, you're like, this is going to be the worst movie I've ever sat through. And it's pretty fucking close. And I think this one maybe just tried, they went with the mirror and the Jesus and tried to do what Candyman was already doing. Maybe just a little too much of that. Maybe, especially in a town like New Orleans, play with voodoo, right? There's a scene when the white people are going, fucking tourist. And I was like, that's how I felt. I felt like I was a tourist with white people telling me shit that I could have gotten better info.
I don't think Farewell to the Flesh is a very good movie. But there's a good movie in there because I think there's pieces of intrigue that actually matter. Like there's the subtext of racial inequality in New Orleans. There's a subtext of wealth inequality in New Orleans, which is fascinating. Like it's one of those things. It's one of those things that's
Are you referring to the last shot where she's like, oh, good, that unsightly slave quarter got washed away,
Christ.
so I won't have to remember how shitty
that was
my
really
family
awkward.
I was like,
that's
wow.
one of those. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like,
white people shit.
There are things that carry over from like the original Candyman, like those like sort of uncomfortable conversations that we don't want to have. That become part of the conversation when when these characters start discussing this movie or the conceit of the film in general. So these uncomfortable pieces start coming in, and I think what Farewell to the Flesh does and doesn't understand that it's doing is it's literally trying to like wash that whole thing away and be like, boy, he's a bad guy, right? He kills people. And it's like, that's not the point of this character. Like, it's a vengeful spirit. It's interesting. I was reading I was reading a little bit about like Virginia Madsen, because this was not supposed to be the sequel. They actually turned down Bernard Rose, the original writer director. They turned down his sequel idea completely. And like she said that Bernard Rose was trying to kind of turn him into like essentially like an African American Dracula was the idea. Because again, it's large. It's a monster myth. It's one of those things that like it follows you. It lurks in the night. It's right around the corner. So to me, that is always what Candyman is, because it not only that, but
Praise
like
off your life
Candyman
force.
is also one of those things. It's like you stare in the mirror and like you and I have both talked about this. I don't have the guts to say that 5 times in the mirror. Do you? Because I don't. Fuck no, I don't at all.
That.
It's the idea that it's constantly driving at you. And I think the thing that Candyman 2 almost gets but totally misses is that the force of curiosity and the force of curiosity and the force of the unknown collide so effortlessly in the first one, and then this one they almost get like smashed together to the point where there's no pieces. It makes me it's kind of it's a weird thing. And then on top of that, there's also a lot less.
It has a bit of that like Scooby-Doo quality where it's just like, oh, it wasn't a flaming head ghost.
Well, there's also
there's
there's another element. A lot of the kills are not as again like right.
It's the same kill every time. He punches through
the kill's
the back
not
and
nearly
like
as
pulls out
elegant
the C7
or interesting
vertebrae.
and like I don't know.
What I think really though, one of the things that the Black Dracula is kind of a cool idea, because I get that, but even more than a vampire, right? I think what this movie doesn't do, which is so fucking strange because it's right there the whole movie, is the first movie has this bit of wish fulfillment horror in it, right? Where Helen so wants to be right and do this that she's willing to exploit people, this and that. And it's this perfect allegory, right? And so the people who end up getting hurt, while not, Candyman says they're innocent, right? They are hurt because Helen was willing to hurt them first, and she paved the way for Candyman. So all the things he's doing and the bad he's doing are spawned from Helen's inner sins in a way, right? Her desire to be famous and powerful, and she doesn't they talk about, oh, the cops don't do anything. I got hurt and they were there. They didn't help those other 2 people. And it's like, do you really give a fuck about that? Like, really? Are you going to go make a difference, Helen? Is that what I'm to fucking believe? I don't, right? And so I think that is where this one misses is I like the idea of the mirrors and having these people draw out their inner shit and let Candyman use that against them, right? That's kind of a Freddy Krueger trope. That he does to a more cartoonish effect, but I think could have been really cool for this one. Or Farewell to the Flesh. It feels like Candyman is so bonded to that flesh, right? He's bonded so much to that moment that he becomes less this original sin apparition and more of just this guy who keeps reliving that trauma over and over and over and over and over. And it just makes Candyman feel smaller and less mysterious.
To me, the Revenge Ghost and the revenge fantasy that follows all make sense to me. Like, but I also agree with you. I feel like that's pretty thin. That lasts not for a very long time. And I think even giving him the proper backstory like they do, like the biggest issue I have with this movie is in giving him a proper backstory altogether and giving him the flashbacks, the whole deal. What you do is you expose something that I don't think needs to be thin, but you make it thin by giving it sort of this weird life. I'm not sure how to describe it, but like
here's how I would think. I get what you're saying, but what I would do. So in the opening, when we're doing Smarmy McPonytail, don't need to hear his fucking spiel or see his Carrot Top prop comedy set. You know what I mean? When he's doing his slideshow, how about instead of a slideshow, which no one's ever wanted to see, put all that Candyman shit up front, right? And then when Candyman is on screen and Tony Todd is just fucking dominating every scene he's in, don't flash back.
That's a good way
Let
to
Tony
put it. Yeah.
Todd
Right.
walk and emote us through that moment, right? Then we've already seen all the shit. We've seen his past, which is fine. I'm fine with seeing it. I thought it was great, right? Just don't, every time Tony Todd is speaking and sucking me into the screen the way I want to be, don't cut to something that is, I mean, because that's the thing. Once you're on your sixth, like, oh, they're still putting bees on him. Right. They're still calling him names. It doesn't have the same effect. Because we also already knew what they had done to him from the first movie. Now we're seeing it. But that's why I'm like, so give that one run and make it more cinematically impactful and have its own little arc within that short segment. And then let Tony Todd just be the leftover hatred and vengeance and depression and sadness. It's interesting
you put it this way, because I was actually thinking about it. Because that flashback, and again, Tony Todd's just an incredible actor. Like, he's unbelievably amazing.
He's fucking unbelievable.
So if you do what you're talking about, which I agree is what needs to happen, or what needed to happen, it's not 1995 anymore. If you take the flashback stuff and put it at the very beginning, because Tony Todd does such a good job of, I mean, he looks younger, he looks more fearful, he looks like a different man, he looks like Daniel. And then later in the movie, when he does that scene, the darkness in his eyes, like, I don't know how this man does this. And this is why I think Tony Todd's one of the greatest actors ever. But this, like, sadness in his face that he carries through the rest of the movie is not reflected in those flashbacks to the point where I'm like, that's a different man. That's a husk of a person. That's what you believe is the real Candyman, is like, that's what's left, and that's what you're talking about. Yeah.
Dude, he weeps when she sees him. I was like, you never see Freddy or Jason or Michael or Chucky or Leprechaun or Penraiser weep. She saw him and experienced, she for 1 minute lightened his burden. And for one flash or series of flashes, however long that moment is, another human being helped carry his trauma and his abuse. And he wept. And that's the kind of shit, because that's the thing, Tony Todd can look extremely menacing. And he's a giant guy. He's 6'5". He just looks great on camera. It's all, everything he does works for me. But that extra layer, right, where Tony Todd can at one point be this horrifying, vengeful spirit, but also you know it's coming from a place where you don't begrudge him that. You're like, maybe some people do need to get got, right? And that beautiful tightrope that he's always able to achieve. And then they go to the flashbacks. There's the moment when the water comes in, and it's very clearly a store mannequin where he just, like, tips over, like, like, there's just weird moments where it felt like it's so strange, because, I mean, maybe Halloween 3, maybe Friday the 13th Part 5, but you're like, it's so strange to have someone like Tony Todd and have this fucking character that is captivating and powerful and amazing, and just continually take the spotlight off of him.
But I'll say this, like, for my money, for Farewell to the Flesh, which, again, I'm not a huge fan of, you're not going to find a better scene in many horror movies than watching Tony Todd act the shit out of both of those scenes. It's unbelievable. On multiple but you're just not going to find that in a lot of other movies. Like, we talk a lot about, like, how much, like, you and I both loved. It was on par with, you know, Toni Collette in Hereditary. Like, that level of love and care for a character, but also just, like, understanding the true nature of the pain that this character has to go through. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing acting.
Right. And it's amazing, and they cast it
right.
Is. And it is what
it's
separates
the key
Candyman.
Scene.
It's the key to making Candyman its own viable thing. And it feels, and you'll see again when we get to Part 3, there is a lot of, like, let's just defer to uninteresting white characters. And it's sad because I feel like Candyman, I mean, to me, Candyman is probably in my top 10 favorite horror movies. I adore it. It's just always a great time to spend watching a movie, and I feel like it gets dragged down by these. And again, I don't think I'm not as harsh on Farewell to the Flesh as you, because in my mind, anytime I get a spin with Candyman is great. I enjoy Tony Todd. There are some cool scenes and things I like in this movie. It did feel a little bit like they went a little overboard with their subtext.
I feel like instead of focusing on
right?
subtext, they just made the subtext text. They just made it text. I think that's the problem with Feral the Flesh, is the subtext becomes text.
It's like one of those Snowball things. You got to have the right amount of juice. You can't overflow it, then it gets your hands all sticky and wet.
Yeah.
It's not good. They overflowed the Snowball. Hey, it's still a Candyman movie, right?
It's a Candyman movie.
It's still a Candyman. It might be a little bit more of like a Smartie than like a full-on Sweet Tart. Hey.
But we get 3 of them, and then we get another one soon.
It still helped get us to the new one, so that's fine. All right, guys, that's it for Candyman 2, Farewell to the Flesh. I hope you found some things to enjoy about it, man. I really do. We'll see you again tomorrow for Candyman 3. We're heading out to Alex's hive, the swarm of coastal elites, to have our final Candyman adventure for a while. Guys, thank you so much for staying with us. We know this has been a ton of episodes. Thank you guys so much for downloading as many as you have. Thank you for all the nice comments and conversation about these. It really does mean the world to us. Please, again, take a second. Leave us a rating and review wherever you find the show, especially if that happens to be Apple Podcast app. That's something very small and easy. Just a quick sentence, 5 stars that you can do for us that helps us out a ton. Shout us out on your socials. We're on all the socials you're on. Email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. With movies you'd like to hear us talk about. There's still time to get in for our December We Stuff Your Stocking listener selection month. And as always, guys, just a big thank you, man. This has been such an awesome journey. And we're closing in on the end, and I'm going to get a little misty-eyed. But, man, when we thought of this idea, it seemed like maybe foolish, but I'm so glad we did it.
Yeah, I got to say, like, this has been my favorite month of the pod. And I know that's just because I know we're doing 31 shows in 31 days, but, like, you guys have made this so worth it.
And awesome guests. It's been a delight.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah, sweets for us, so apparently. Lucky. Sweets for us. We're the sweets. We're getting all the sweets this month.
All the sweets.
Bye.
Bye.
Good God, man. See, that's why I give you that preacher face. Oh, dear Lord, give me the strength.